Ringyo is one of my most anticipated games releasing this year. I was really excited when I saw the solo version of the game in alpha on Board Game Arena a few weeks ago. Since then, I've played it quite a few times, and now that the Kickstarter is live, I'm ready to give my 2 cents on the game, and I hope it helps you with your decision to back it or not. I'll go over what stood out to me with the game mechanisms, game comparisons, a peer review, and then my final thoughts on the game, particularly touching on the similarities and differences the solo game provides. Ringyo is a game set in feudalistic Japan during the Edo period, where as a daimyo, you tend to your province of forests and hope to impress the shogun by having the most victory points at the end of 5 rounds of play. The main aspect of this game is simultaneous worker placement on a personal board of forest tiles. You have different strengths of workers to use, and the better the worker, the more options and actions you have, as well as being able to activate more than one tile on your board. The game revolves around planting trees, growing them, cutting them down to use for buildings. However, you can also study trees, which advances you up a multi-directional track, as well as put down rice paddies and farms, which earn you rice. Before worker actions are taken, you play cards during the council phase to acquire bonuses before taking actions. Players simultaneously choose a card and also associated with a bonus, and the highest number gets to pick a benefit first. This priority decided in this phase is also affecting how the shogun demand phase occurs. When after all actions are taken during the main action phase, you basically turn in or meet resource requirements to score endgame points based off of a variable set of orders to fulfill. Finally, after actions are taken before the shogun demand phase, a period of flooding occurs. Each round, 3 cards are face down, which will determine which types of tiles on your tableau will receive rain. Each round is seeded so a certain percentage of tile types become more or less likely to receive rain. Spaces with rice gain you rice, and trees get you growth. However, if they are empty, they are flooded, requiring you to plant a tree on them and not construct a building or a rice paddy on them, typically. This flooding can cascade if the rain falls on an already flooded area, knocking out trees and buildings, no matter their size, that falls spatially beneath the area that is flooded. For game comparisons, we obviously need to compare this game to other Paverson games in their prior lineup, like Luthier, which is their latest big box game from last year. And I think this is the biggest comparison here because it follows some similar mechanisms where both games revolve around mini games of contract fulfillment. You have different areas of each game that you're trying to interact with. Maybe you choose a few of them to interact with more than others. And it essentially boils down to gaining resources and trading them in for cards or the ability to get points or fulfill a certain and locate yourself in a certain spot on the board. And so both have a very similar feel to what you can interact with in both games. Also, both games offer decisions surrounding order of play each round, where workers in Luthier and the Edo Council period in Ringyo allow for an ever-changing turn order depending on what worker numbers you use. For example, in Luthier, for the different areas of the board and the different action groupings that you have, whoever placed the higher number card gets to take that action first, and so on and so forth with all the action spaces. Whereas in Ringyo is kind of the opposite, but similar, where the beginning of each round per se has that player turn order dynamically set up based off of which card is selected simultaneously but in secret. So the dynamics of player turn order really come into play in both games involving either workers or cards that you play. And then finally, aside from Luthier, we have some other games that I thought this felt very similar to. The simultaneous tableau activation system is reminiscent of games like Earth, where tough decisions based off of spatial planning of trees, which is a component that you see in both games, are taken at the same time. Every player is taking these turns and figuring out what actions to take, resolving those actions, and doing all of that at the same time which really cuts down on downtime. And the other game is actually a Suhi game, which is Woodcraft. This came out a couple of years ago. It's a game that I really enjoy. And I really like that game because it has the aspect of acquiring resources in the form of dice. And you can, like with wood, split the dice or join them together to manipulate the pip that is face up on the dice and use them for whatever you need to use them for. And then you can do the same thing. I didn't mention that before, but the trees that you cut down, if you like cut down a 5 stacked tree, you can cut that into 2 and 3 different sizes of wood, and that can affect you for like the demands that you're trying to fulfill, as well as the building requirements that you need to put in order to play them on your board. And so you have that little extra decision on how to cut and paste different tree sizes together in both games. That is a fun decision to make. When I do a peer review, I usually turn to Board Game Geek and look at the comments, but since this game is so new on Kickstarter, I turn to what previewers had to say. In general, they praise the game for looking great on the table with a really thoughtful theme surrounding gameplay. And of course, the simultaneous gameplay offers an experience that many who like games like Earth really appreciate. Depending on your viewpoint, though, some of the downsides of this game, which could be upsides if you look at it at a certain angle, depending on your taste, involve how deep this puzzle can be, and also how punishing the game can be with the flooding mechanism. Figuring out which types of workers to use and planning your tableau to pursue the goals you want to accomplish can take a lot of analysis on your turns. The flooding can cascade and really tear your game state apart if you're not careful, very similar to how cascading outbreaks in games like Pandemic work, really losing control of the situation at hand. And so it might not be to the taste of those who don't tolerate a really punishing game to play with the opportunity to like really lose control of your game state and be punished for it. Before I move on to my final thoughts, so the solo version plays like the main game except for 2 main things, right? You're taking your actions as you would during the regular game. But first, in the Edo Council period, you use your number cards to select from a market of cards. You're not battling anyone else for turn order, but the higher the value of the card that you play, the further down the market you can acquire those cards from. And the Shogun demand works differently as well, where goals can be met as a free action at any time and not specifically at the end of a round, but you have a main goal in the middle surrounded by other demands. And you first must fulfill a demand surrounding your main goal. So you move a marker onto that goal that you just fulfilled, and then that allows the opportunity to fulfill the main goal in the center of this kind of target. And so you move your token back and forth from a demand to a goal card to a demand and back to a goal card. And all the while acquiring points and refreshing the demands and main goals as well as you do so. So there's a dynamic set of different contracts that you're trying to fulfill. There are ways to mitigate some of these as well and to follow those that you might have a better chance at fulfilling. But in essence, you are picking and choosing and following this very dynamic set of goals to play. For my final thoughts on the game, I give it a 7.8 out of 10. I do agree with previewers that this game looks great and thematically is very interesting. I really was drawn to this game because of its theme. I've really enjoyed the mechanisms and think that it flows in a really good way. I haven't played it multiplayer yet, but I can imagine it would feel very similar to how Earth does. And that's a positive for me. I do like that simultaneous situation and experience. But where I think this game gets to me, though, is with its variability, first of all. What changes from game to game are the demands that you're trying to fulfill, whether they're in the solo game or multiplayer. And the arrangement of the tiles on your board is modular as well for what types of trees are where. And of course, you have the weather cards that are different, the bonus cards that you get from the council period as well that you bid for, etc. Right? There's small variations here and there, but the study and building tracks are the same. And so it's all about manipulating your tableau to the best of your ability with what setup you might have randomly been given to meet the same requirements every time if you choose to really pursue either building a lot of buildings or going up the study track, or both, right? Or pursuing the Shogun demands as well. Now, after a handful of plays, I feel quite satisfied with how I've interacted with the game. I don't feel like I could learn much more about the nuances of different ways to explore the game, other than to obviously continue to improve on my spatial planning to achieve higher scores. Now, don't get me wrong, this game is quite tough and strategic, which is great for those like me who enjoy heavy board games. And for example, I haven't won the solo mode. You can get a score in the solo mode, but there is a certain threshold based off of what is given to you during the game. And there are also different tiers of difficulty that the solo mode provides. And I haven't even beat on the simplest of difficulties. And so it's a challenge for sure. But to me, it's one of those games where I feel like I'm playing against the game. And of course, that's obvious in the solo mode, but I feel like that would be apparent to me as well during a multiplayer game. I'm playing against the game rather than against other players. And that's another point that of the game that really didn't hit for me, is that the interaction parts of the game are not as prevalent as what I prefer in a game now. I've talked about a lot of very highly interactive games that you're really getting to the way of other players and you're playing against the other players rather than against the game. The game kind of just gives you all the tools that you need necessary to play, and then you're reacting and planning and being very strategic based off of what other players choose to do. And not every game needs to feature this level of interaction, but I feel like I have a set of low interaction games like Euro games in my collection that I really enjoy, and it really takes a game to really stand out. And I think it might be games that have a variation in game to game that is intriguing to me, or just has a really interesting or important theme to me as well. And Ringyo hasn't done quite enough to make it feel like it stands out among those games that I've already played. I will say that Ringyo is my favorite of the Patterson games to release, from others such as Distilled and Luthier. But in all, I'm pretty satisfied with what I've seen, and I will probably look forward to playing this game maybe once or twice in the multiplayer setting, and I think I would be satisfied with that. But I do plan on waiting for the game to hit retail before I make that decision and see if it does hit differently in a multiplayer sense. But as of now, I'm happy to wait, and I'm happy to wait for the retail to release rather than go for the Kickstarter. Looking at the page as well, it's a Kickstarter that offers, there is a mini expansion that might shake up the game in a significant way, but for the most part, you're paying for a deluxeified edition of the game, which once again looks really good and would really make this table presence feel relevant, and so that might be worth it for you. But for me, mechanically, it's not a game that I think I will enjoy up to like 10 plays or more, right? I really enjoy a game that I think I could play 10 or more times as a kind of an abstracted bar to be set. But I don't think I would enjoy it to that same degree. But I think it's a very good game. I really enjoy the depth and the strength, the difficulty of the puzzle. But yeah, I've seen enough and have enjoyed it and am ready to move on. So those are my thoughts on Ringyo. Let me know what you think. If you've been able to play it on Board Game Arena, it is available on beta now, and so you can try it solo to get a taste for the mechanisms. And but yeah, let me know if you agree or disagree. It doesn't matter to me, but I enjoy discussing it either way. Thank you for watching this video, and I hope you have a good one. Take care.